Fine,
So
you got your fine. Straight up, you got your ass kicked.
Don't be conservative. Tell me I got my ass kicked.
You did.
No, we were getting a normal intro. We're not getting a normal intro, baby. The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions, and welcome to Championship Rings.
Well then, my boy. Yeah, your Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions, all right. We certainly got a lot to get into. I'm not even gonna waste time on this. Brandon, the stage is yours, my friend.
Josh, I've gone back to the bye week when it was 2-2, and the Philadelphia Eagles were looking bleak on offense. There was question about Nick Sirianni. He was fighting with fans in the stands. Callers on 94.1 WIP in Philly wanted him fired. There were people like you who, and I quote, said, "Will the real Jalen Hurts stand up?" From that moment forward, this Eagles team went 16-1, with their only loss being the game that Jalen Hurts left in the first quarter due to a concussion. This was not just a Super Bowl victory. I do not care what the final score says. This was a Seattle Seahawks, Denver Broncos, Super Bowl 48-esque beatdown of Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. And what I've been saying for the past 2 weeks all came to fruition. As great as Jalen Hurts played, as great as Saquon Barkley was all season long, they did not really win the Philadelphia Eagles the Super Bowl. What won the Philadelphia Eagles their second Super Bowl in franchise history, and my second Super Bowl in franchise history, was Jalen Carter. Josh Sweat, who I thought made a case for himself. He could have been MVP of this game. Nolan Smith, Brandon Graham, Jordan Davis, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, Zach Bond, and that Eagles defense, who absolutely put the Kansas City offense, Patrick Mahomes included, in a straitjacket for 4 quarters. The Philadelphia Eagles had more points at the end of the first half than the Kansas City Chiefs had yards. And yet, despite that statistic, I got to admit to you, at the start of the second half, I was still not 100% convinced. I gave Kansas City their respect. I said, oh, they're going to come out of the second half. They're going to show something. Don't let up. And all we did was we went right down the field, and we got a field goal. We got another turnover, and then Jalen Hurts was able to hit Devontae Smith when Kevin Burkhardt in the booth said they're just going to run the clock. Oh, no, maybe he's going to throw the dagger. Bam, 50 yards through the air. Touchdown, Devontae Smith. At that point, the game was over. Complete domination. This Eagles team, like I've been saying since week 4, Jalen said, Vic, I apologize. They were better than your Detroit Lions. They were better than the Kansas City Chiefs. They were better than the Buffalo Bills. Jalen Hurts proved himself to all the doubters out there. Howie Roseman now, in my opinion, is a Hall of Fame general manager. And Nick Sirianni proved to himself that he is not, as Pat McAfee would say, and I quote, some big dumb dipshit. He is one of the best head coaches in the National Football League.
It'll be interesting to see how they replace Kellen Moore, because that means it's going to be another offensive coordinator in the ear of Jalen Hurts.
His 9th in 8 years.
Yes. But I want to just point out something super quick, not to start any type of controversy. When it came to voting for Super Bowl MVP, I actually voted for Devontae Smith. That's not trying to take any credit away from what Jalen Hurts did or what the defense did, because they both played,
America, thank you.
they both played great. But I thought that the bomb you're talking about, that was, like you said, that was the dagger. So maybe I'm putting a little too much emphasis on that one play. But for me, I voted for Devontae. But again, that's not to take anything away from the defense, because holy crap, your defense just said, Kansas City, you're not doing anything. You said it reminded you of the Seattle Denver Super Bowl. It actually reminded me more of what Tampa Bay did to Kansas.
Everybody has said that, and I completely get where you're coming from. What I was saying was, forget the two garbage touchdowns Kansas City scored at the end of the game. I mean, who cares? Nick Sirianni was getting a Gatorade bath dumped on him before Patrick Mahomes for that touchdown pass to Xavier Worthy. What I'm talking about was the score was reminiscent of that Denver Seattle Super Bowl until the final 2 minutes.
Oh, and I'm not disagreeing with you on that either, because I totally understand where you're coming from. But the way your defense basically, I think I heard the stat correctly. You guys got 6 sacks on Mahomes, and how many blitzes did you have? Zero.
Now that stat is sort of misleading because a blitz means it doesn't mean that a linebacker is coming. It means you're bringing more than 4 rushers. There were times where they would have Josh Sweat drop out and Zach Bond would blitz, if you will, or he'd come from a linebacker position. So they wouldn't just send their front 4 pass rushers. They mix up their looks, but they never sent more than 4 rushers.
Yes. But what was interesting is if you watched that game, which I know you did,
127, I think I saw, million people. I know it was the most watched Super Bowl ever if you count Fox, Tubi, and the other sources of watching.
Okay, but my point though is this: if you really watch that game closely, kind of like with an analyst cap or however you want to say it, you would have seen that the Eagles weren't doing anything sophisticated on defense. They basically lined up in that same defensive formation the entire game, and Kansas City couldn't do anything with it. I kind of forgot Travis Kelce was on the field.
Yeah, he didn't catch a ball in the first half, as far as I remember. And listen, we'll get into this at some point. Trav, it was a great career for you, buddy. But let me just say this: it's a love story, baby. Just say yes. Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, your asses belong with me now. And Travis, you can go to your little girlfriend who grew up a Philadelphia Eagles fan, by the way, and you guys can run out to the sunset because I think his career is over.
I would tend to agree with you. But, and we'll get more into this later, but this does a lot in terms of Jalen Hurts and how we view him. Because if you go back to Super Bowl 57, if it hadn't been for the fumble, I think the Eagles are Super Bowl champions in that game too.
C.J. Gardner-Johnson said it before the game. He said not even the fumble, if the field was not slippery in that game, the Philadelphia Eagles would have dominated the defensive line. It would have looked exactly what it looked like on Sunday.
Most likely. I don't want to say for sure because you just never know.
The only thing I know for sure is this helmet right here is the new excellence for what greatness looks like in the National Football League.
And I don't think this is just a one-off for the Eagles to win this one Super Bowl. Because think about it. You got A.J. Brown locked up. You got Jalen Hurts locked up. You got Devontae locked up. Saquon's probably going to be there for a few years. Most of your defensive line, if I'm not mistaken, is on their rookie contracts.
Outside of Sweat. Sweat's a free agent, but we got the kid Hunt, number 58, who is the second most highest graded player in the Super Bowl according to Pro Football Focus.
Okay. The one player that might concern me just in terms of your defense, if you lose him, is Zach Bond. I think he was a great pickup for you.
I agree, and I unfortunately think someone is going to pay him a lot of money.
So that might be a hole you have to fill. But knowing Howie Roseman, he'll find somebody in free agency or in the draft because he has a tendency to do that. His last, like 3 or 4, just looking at first round in terms of draft picks, all of them home runs, way out of the ballpark.
And by the way, this is another point that Ross Tucker, who works for CBS, he does the Eagles preseason games on their local TV there in Philadelphia. He made a great point, and he said that it's also about not only about how we drafting these guys, but it's about player development because players like Nolan Smith, players like Jacoby Dean, who didn't even play in the game obviously because he suffered that injury against Green Bay. Even Cooper DeJean. These guys, like DeJean, he didn't start the season. He was barely played the first 4 weeks of the season. Nolan Smith barely played his rookie year. Jacoby Dean barely played his first 2 years. So it really is about not only drafting your good young talent, but developing them.
Yeah. And we didn't really see much of Quinyon Mitchell in this game either, if I remember correctly.
No. And you know why? If you never hear a corner's name, that means that they are doing their job because they are taking away the number one receiver. I mean, he flat out, from everything I've heard from PFF, he flat out took away Xavier Worthy or Juju Smith-Schuster, whoever was on that side.
Yeah. So, this was more about your defense. We'll get more into this in a sec. But, A.J. Brown made a couple big plays in this game. Let's just get right into it. As much as I want to give credit to the Eagles offense, like I said, I voted for Devontae Smith for Super Bowl MVP. You got to give the full credit to the Eagles defense, not just because of the performance they put on, but because of who it was against. You have to take that type of stuff into account. Like, when the Buccaneers did what they did in the Super Bowl, you have to take into account that it was against Mahomes.
They did it a different style, too. They blitzed Mahomes.
Right. And when we're talking about what you mentioned, the Seahawks-Broncos game, that was against Peyton Manning. When you put on a defensive performance like that against one of these top-tier quarterbacks, whether it's Brady, Manning, Mahomes, whoever you want to throw in there, it just heightens that defensive performance to another level. But just to go back to the offense for a minute, the fact that, they only asked Jalen Hurts to throw the ball, about 30 times. I know it was under that, but I'm just going to round up just for the sake of conversation. And you didn't hear a lot from Saquon. And I remember, a lot of the pre-game discussion, you and I were talking about this a little bit. If the Chiefs were able to, quote-unquote, bottle up Saquon, limit him, not necessarily stop him, because a running back of his caliber, you're not necessarily going to stop him necessarily. But I think you and I were kind of on the same page in that regard, that if you can at least contain Saquon to a certain extent and put the ball in Jalen Hurts' hands, you're going to be in good shape if you're Kansas City. I think that was kind of the perception. Maybe I'm misquoting what you misinterpreting
Well,
what you were
well,
saying.
I just said flat out we're going to win the game. I did not think if you put the ball in Jalen Hurts' hands, it was a detriment. I wanted them to put the ball in Jalen Hurts' hands because I know that when the game is bigger, when the stage is brighter, Jalen Hurts makes big plays. Jalen Hurts. This now includes uh, the Super Bowl. Do you know in his last 14 games started and finished? He has 35 total touchdowns. That includes passing and rushing. Two total turnovers. The only sign that I got a little bit worried when I thought, oh boy, Kansas City could make this a game, is the only interception Jalen threw on that third down when I thought we could have cashed in with Jake Elliott, got up 10-0. Bam, Jalen Hurts for the interception. And I said, oh, here we go. We just gave him the ball back. And you know my details I've detailed all the time about if you turn the ball over against Kansas City even one time, you're going to lose the game. Well, my
Yes,
defense,
you said that in the AFC Championship
yep.
between Buffalo and Kansas City. I definitely remember you saying that.
But
Continue.
I always said before the AFC Championship game, I said Kansas City hasn't turned the ball over in 8 games. If that's going to come back, it regress back to the mean. They did. They had the one turnover against Buffalo. It didn't hurt them. Patrick Mahomes threw two of the worst interceptions of his whole career in the Super Bowl. The one to Cooper DeJean, I don't think he just didn't see him. And the one that Zach Bond made was an incredible catch by Bond. But the credit on that play does not go to Zach Bond, to me. It goes to Josh Sweat for literally taking Joe Tooney and throwing him into the lap of Patrick Mahomes, forcing him to throw the ball quicker than he wanted to.
Do you remember one of the keys I said going into this game about Dewan Jones?
Jawan Jones, the Chiefs right
Yes,
tackle. Yeah,
Dewan Jones. Do you remember what I said about that?
yeah, about how he always gets false starts.
Yeah,
Good. Yep.
and and I think the Eagles took full advantage of him defensively. Like wherever he was lined up, that's where I that's where I saw the pressure mostly coming from. Like it felt like Philadelphia was almost targeting him. Not to again,
Yeah.
not to take
Yeah.
any credit away what you from your overall scheme, but from my perspective, that's what it felt like you guys were doing.
That was a masterclass from Philadelphia Eagles fan growing up, defensive coordinator Vic Fangio, who most importantly did not decide to throw the game like Jonathan Gannon did 2 years ago, and just like Ellen Moore decided to call a perfect game at the perfect time. And Josh, I'm going to tell you something not a lot of people out there know. Maybe it's more public knowledge now. Maybe you know about this. Maybe you don't. I'm not sure. You know, last year, Vic Fangio, where he was. He was the defensive coordinator in Miami. Do you remember what the Dolphins players said when Vic Fangio left the building?
I do not.
They said they were glad he was gone because he coached them too hard. That was literally what had their defense. Jalen Ramsey, their other corner, who I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head. Because Mike McDaniel, is such a good cop out there that apparently Vic Fangio coached him too hard, and they all went to Mike McDaniel and cried, "We don't want hard coaching." And Vic Fangio came into my town this offseason and told Dick Sirianni, "We need more physical, hard practices and training camp. We need to get these guys acclimated. We need to get these guys being able to tackle." And guess what? They did. And guess what? I don't care what the outside noise was on Nick Sirianni. Who was the only freaking Philadelphia Eagles fan in America that defended Nick Sirianni? You're
You
looking
did.
at him right here
You
because
did.
I knew deep down these players loved Nick Sirianni. You could hear him on the sideline. You could hear him in the locker room. You can make fun of Nick Sirianni all you want. He wears jerseys to the game. He looks like he has a punchable face. He gets rowdy. He coaches like a fan. Sure, he does. But you know what is no mistake? I don't care how talented your roster is. Nick Sirianni, since becoming the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, has the best winning percentage in the history of the NFL for how many games he's coached, 50 plus. And he also has the most wins in the NFL at that time, just surpassing who? Patrick Mahomes. Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs.
It'll be interesting to see how that relationship continues to develop between Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts, especially with them having to bring in another offensive coordinator. As we mentioned earlier, Kellen Moore is going to be the next head coach for the New Orleans Saints.
Well,
Whoever the
that's a perfect transition. Let's talk about Jalen, and in regard, obviously, Kellen Moore leaving.
yes, um, you know, it's it's really interesting to talk about the question that's on the screen right now. How does not just a Super Bowl, but Super Bowl MVP change the perception of Jalen Hurts? It's a fascinating question because I feel like there's so many different avenues and roads, whatever, that you could go down, you know, because now you have to include his name when you say who's beaten Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. It's Tom Brady 2 times, it's Joe Burrow, and it's Jalen Hurts. Josh Allen can't say that. Lamar Jackson can't say that. You know, but here's the other thing. I I know that Joe Burrow is in that discussion, but you got to put Jalen Hurts ahead of Joe Burrow because Joe Burrow got to a Super Bowl, but he lost to Matthew Stafford. Jalen Hurts got to a Super Bowl, outplayed Patrick Mahomes, lost, gets back to a Super Bowl 2 years later, outplays Mahomes again, and wins this time. So for me, you have to put Jalen Hurts ahead of guys like Lamar, Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow, even though some of them have more accolades than Jalen Hurts. But because Jalen, I'll use the quote from leading up to WrestleMania last year, which was in Philadelphia, but because Jalen Hurts finished the story, I feel like you have to put him ahead of Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, because again, of who he beat in the Super Bowl, the quarterback who was on the opposing side, he he didn't have to throw 40, 50, 60 times in the game. You know, he had a respectable, like, I don't remember his exact yardage, but it was respectable. I wouldn't say it was anything like, oh my God.
I thought it was close to 250.
Yeah. But you get what I'm saying, though?
Well, it's funny. You're saying all that, and I agree with you, but I'm going to tell you something. There are going to be people still saying Jalen Hurts isn't even the best quarterback in his own conference, in his own division. That's what they're going to say. I guarantee you there are people on the air today across sports media that will still take Jaden Daniels over Jalen Hurts.
I've Let me just say this. I I think it's a bit of a wider gap between Jaden Daniels and Jalen Hurts. But would you agree that within the NFC East, it's clear cut?
Oh,
Not
that was clear. I'm going to be completely honest with you.
okay.
That was clear in the preseason of this year. That's how
Okay.
good I thought Jaden Daniels could be. That's why I picked Washington to finish second over Dallas.
Okay. So you agree with me that it's Jalen Hurts. I would put Jaden Daniels about here, and then it's Dallas and
Based off the regular season, because I could hear arguments during the regular season. Jalen wasn't playing that well. Jaden was so good that Jaden was having a better season than Jalen.
okay.
That I agreed with. I think we struggle in the media with like CJ Stroud, right? He had such a good year last year. Some people wanted to make him a top 5 quarterback. You can have great years. It doesn't mean that you're overall better because you don't have the experience. Jalen Hurts does have the experience. He's been doubted his whole career. I mean, he was doubted at Alabama. He was benched for Tua. He had to transfer to Oklahoma. He backed up Carson Wentz. In 2021 and 2022, they said he couldn't throw. They said Philadelphia needed to move on and find a quarterback between Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson. And then last year with the turnovers, they said Jalen Hurts' Super Bowl year was a lucky year. He's never going to get back to that level. Guess what? He did. And he did exactly what he said he was going to do. And that was, like you said, Josh, finish the story.
Um, And the interesting thing with Philadelphia, as long as they keep, you know, the system in place that got them to this Super Bowl, you know, running the football primarily with Saquon, having Jalen throw about 30 times a game, not going crazy with it, keeping your receivers happy, you you don't need to put up, you know, 500 yards of offense as a quarterback. I mean, you don't
So
need to do that.
I'll be the first one to say I am so glad that we won this year's Super Bowl because I think next year is going to be hard. Um, Next year's schedule that we have is a murderer's row. We have to go to Kansas City for the Super Bowl rematch. We have to go to Buffalo. We have to play the entire NFC North. We have to go to Green Bay. We have to go to Minnesota. We host Detroit. We host Chicago. Um,
You have to host Denver. You have to host the Rams.
we have to go to the Chargers. We have to play Washington twice. We have to play Dallas twice. And no matter what you think of Dallas, they're a. So my point is, like, I think this 14-3 regular season magical run, like right now as I'm sitting here, I think we're gonna win 10 games. I think we're gonna have a little bit of a Super Bowl hangover. Like today, no free agency moves, no nothing. I would not be surprised if Washington wins the division next year. And I think there is always a Super Bowl win pullback outside of Kansas City. Even New England, when they won next year, they weren't always as dominant. Um, I think this team is good. I think that Jalen Hurts will be scrutinized more. And again, I don't think Jalen Hurts always plays great week to week, but I think Jalen Hurts shows up and he plays well when it matters. And the most important thing he did this year, and I hope it continues with whatever coordinator is coaching him next year, is cutting back on the turnovers. He had 5 before the bye week, week 4. He had 2 the rest of the season.
So what I will say is, you know, I was one of the people, as you quoted me, saying like, "Will the real Jalen Hurts please stand up?" I feel like all that criticism leading up to this game, leading up to it,
It wasn't just this year, it was all last year. It
but
started during the supernatural funk. It started when this guy that we can now kill this meme because Coach Petza was officially dead to me, but it started with that supernatural funk last year.
okay, but I'm just talking about just this season,
Okay.
just this season, taking last season out of the equation for sake of conversation. I understand why you brought it up though. Based on what I had seen of him, it was like I'm not sure who the real Jalen Hurts is. Like leading up to this game, so like, and I felt like the criticisms he was getting were valid based off of what I was seeing of him, you know, in these games, whether it was against Atlanta on Monday Night Football or he didn't have a dominant performance against us in week 6. And there are a few other games I could point to. So I don't think the criticism that he faced during just this season was invalid. Did he put most of that criticism to rest after this game? Yes. I'm totally giving him his credit. I'm not trying to take anything away from him. I'm just simply saying the the criticism and, you know, some of the negativity that came his way just on based on this season was valid until he, you know, pushed back in the way he did. Is
Okay.
that is that
So
fair to say?
maybe it's because I'm a fan and I watch obviously all, 17 plus 4, 21 Philadelphia Eagles game, 60 minutes times 21. Well, 60, like 1,200 minutes total of Philadelphia Eagles football this year. But I just think that Jalen, Sirianni, the whole team, like, and it's not just you, Josh, because everybody was saying it outside of me and a couple people that I think you watch Buffalo right now, as explosive they are, and how good Josh Allen is, and you watch Kansas City, and you watch, even Cincinnati and Burrow and Chase and that explosive offense, and you watch Jalen Hurts, and you watch the Eagles, and it doesn't look the same, right? It doesn't look like they're as in sync as Buffalo or Kansas City or even a Cincinnati or even a Chargers, right, with Justin Herbert. Like, we watch all
Or
these
even like a Denver to a certain extent.
Bo Nix, Lamar Jackson. Like, you watch all those teams. They're more sexy, they're more flashier, and at times they dominated people like Philly. Or excuse me, they dominated people unlike the way Philadelphia was winning games. But I think the thing that people missed the most about this team was they just won games. They found a way to win. They won different ways. They won defensive games. They won offensive games. And they just kept nicking away, nicking away, nicking away. And then you look up in the first half, you're like, oh, Philly's losing. Philly's not playing well, or they're tired, or they only have 10 points. You look up at the end of the game and you go, how the hell did Philly beat the Rams 37-14? How the hell did Philly beat Baltimore 31-22? I think it was just hard for people to, in their minds, envision this team as a Super Bowl team because the beginning of the year, for whatever reason, I think it's because of part of what happened the year before, and the media just could not get it out of their heads. They thought that this team still had some funk in it somewhere, but it's like part of you was like, the Lions are so sexy, Baltimore is so sexy, Kansas City, Buffalo, that it's like, oh, the Philadelphia is not as good as them. When in reality, Philadelphia actually had a more talented team than all of them.
I, I will say this: when you played Baltimore, that was a pretty evenly matched game. I wouldn't say you
I
were.
would say Philly dominated the second half. I would agree with you on the first half. I think Baltimore missed some kicks. It could have been a closer game. But the moment this team became special for me was when Cooper DeJean took Derrick Henry and pile drove him to the ground. That was a statement. This team is different.
I think the game that made me realize the Eagles were legit. I'm trying to remember. Yes, it was the Sunday night game in LA against the
It's
Rams.
crazy when you think about it. Do you know that that was our only Sunday night game the whole year?
You're gonna get more this coming season. I can guarantee you that.
Well, obviously, we're gonna get Mike and Chris on opening night, which is on NBC.
Yes. Um, if I had to make, by the way, if I were scheduling the opening game for the Eagles, I would make it be against the Rams. That's just me.
Really,
Yes.
I think they're gonna make it Commanders
I wouldn't be surprised if it's Commanders or the Cowboys.
or
Uh,
or Detroit.
yeah, but I don't know. There was just something about the way you guys won that game against the Rams. I watched that and I'm like, okay, this team's actually legit. Like, I, there was just something about that Rams game. I can't tell you the exact reason, but I watched them like, okay, this team does have that Super Bowl tone or whatever word you want to use there.
Before we move on to our next topic, you know what's crazy? You know what I told you when it happened? And by the way, it still gives credit now that we won the Super Bowl. You know who played the best game against the Philadelphia Eagles all year long?
Who?
Carolina.
That's hilarious.
Bryce Young should have beat Philadelphia. Bryce Young was sensational. He played a better game against that Eagles defense than Joe Burrow did, Lamar Jackson did, Patrick Mahomes did.
That's true, yeah. I'd have to go back and look at the stats, but
Just watch the highlights. Watch Bryce Young, Dick and Dodge, Nick and Dodge, whatever word you want to say, Jalen Gardner, Nolan Smith. Watch the throw he makes to Xavier Legette in the end zone with about 43 seconds left. That probably would have won the game. Hits him right in the hands in the end zone.
Yeah.
So,
Um,
okay, well, let's talk about 26.
yeah. Because was he the clear missing piece for the Eagles? Because it's like you didn't have him last year, and we saw what happened. You had that epic collapse, and it resulted in a wild card loss to the Buccaneers. He comes, he signs with you over the offseason after the Giants were sure he wouldn't go to Philadelphia. Uh, and you go on to win a Super Bowl. So was he the clear missing piece?
So, I told a buddy of mine this. Miles Sanders was very good as a running back in Philadelphia, right?
Yeah.
DeAndre Swift was very good as a running back in Philadelphia, right?
Yes.
The difference between those two backs and Saquon was those two backs would take, a 2, 3 yard carry, turn it into four. Saquon takes a 2, 3 yard carry, turns it into five. Takes an 8 yard carry, turns it into 10. Takes a 10 yard carry and turns it into 60. He was the best running back I've ever seen in an Eagles uniform. And I've seen Brian Westbrook. He's one of the reasons why I fell in love with an Eagle. And I've seen LaShawn McCoy. If you count the regular season and the playoffs, Saquon Barkley had the most rushing yards in the NFL of all time in the season. So it would be easy to say he was the clear missing piece. But I don't think it's fair to him to just put it on him alone and say that he was the clear missing piece.
Okay.
Because I think he was a missing piece. I think this team had multiple missing pieces. I think on the offensive side of the ball, he was the clear missing piece.
All right.
On the defense side of the ball, I think it was very clear those two corners, Quinyon Mitchell, and I'm even going to say Cooper DeJean, who was the number one ranked corner in the NFL this year by Pro Football Focus. Period. Stop. End of story. Those two rookies, plus you add in CJ Gardner Johnson back in the secondary, who brought toughness to that group. You add in Zach Bond, who was an outside linebacker and played special teams for the New Orleans Saints that everybody thought was just going to be a backup. Vic Fangio turned him into a middle linebacker, and he led the NFL in tackles. I thought he should have been the defensive player of the year, and he didn't even get a second place vote for it. You add in the fact that Nakobe Dean developed, went from this guy who was, a third round pick, very good at Georgia, but had injury concerns. He had over 100 tackles. And then you add in the depth of guys like Nolan Smith, who came on strong this year, Brandon Graham, Jackson Hunt, who I just said, Josh Sweat, Jordan Davis, Milton Williams. Like, I think all of it came together. If you want to say on the field, Saquon was the clear missing piece, I hear you, I get it, I totally understand it, but don't take away from those other additions Howie Roseman made, and not only that, but the additions off the field technically of Kellen Moore's offensive coordinator, who adapted his scheme to fit what this Philadelphia team needed, and Vic Fangio as defensive coordinator.
So I hear you on all the other additions, and I'm not as well versed in the Philadelphia Eagles, to be fair, because I'm not really a Eagles fan in the same manner you are, uh, as you can tell. But I don't hate the Eagles by any extent. um, but from what this again, I just have to go based off of what I saw because I couldn't watch every Eagles game. It felt like Saquon was the overall missing piece because of something you mentioned. Your defense, while they benefited a lot from those other players you mentioned, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, and many of the other, Zach Bond, um, and a lot of the others you mentioned, I think the reason they your defense was able to be so dominant as they were throughout the season was because Philadelphia, or specifically Jalen Hurts, would just go, "Hey, Saquon, here you go," and they instead of like a quick one one play bomb to Devontae or A.J. Brown. Excuse me. Philadelphia's offense was more of like a, I don't know, like a 10 play, seven,
There
seven.
was a drive. Do you remember the drive against Pittsburgh to end the game? When
Yes.
Pittsburgh punted the ball and with 10 minutes left of the Philadelphia 47, and they never got the ball back.
And that's exactly what I'm saying. Um, again, not trying to take any credit away from what you guys did defensively, but I think a lot of that is because you got brought in a guy like Saquon, which allowed you to establish the run game that made Jalen Hurts better as a runner
Yes.
because
Yes. That
we
I
got,
agree with 100%, but it goes both ways too.
sure.
Jalen's presence outmakes Saquon. And the other thing I will say too, as great as Saquon is, he also did lead the league in rushing yards before contact. So that also has to do a lot with Jordan Mawaya, Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, Mekhi Becton, who the Eagles took as a project. He was the left tackle with the Jets, moved into right guard, fit in seamlessly there. And then obviously Wayne Johnson, the right tackle. And Cam Jurgens, the center, a lot of people have questions about. Remember, that was the big topic that we had in the offseason. Could Cam Jurgens replace Jason Kelsey? Because that was a huge topic. Remember that? Oh, Philadelphia's offensive line is going to fall apart without Jason Kelsey. Guess what? This might have been the most dominant offensive line I've ever had in my life.
Yeah. So, but that's what I'm saying is like because your offensive line was so strong, that allowed your run game to be very effective. So you were able to put together drives of like 10 plays, 70 plus yards, keeping the ball for 5 plus minutes. That allowed your defense to rest up on the sidelines, get reinvigorated, so that guys like Nolan Smith, N'Kobe Dean, Zach Vaughn, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell could go make the necessary plays that they did throughout the season.
I mean, how many times did I tell you, well, why are the Eagles punting? What went wrong? Because something had to go wrong for this team to punt. They were that talented. They could have scored on every drive if they wanted to.
I don't think we even heard the punter's name once for the Eagles during.
We punted early in the game. Remember when they pinned Mahomes back? It was 7-0.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, actually, no. Remember, it was 0-0 on the first drive because they called a phantom offensive pass interference call on A.J.
Yes.
Brown. And I said, oh, no, here we go.
Yep. I do remember that. I I did agree with the call only because AJ was like had his hands basically on the.
Well, I would have agreed with it too, and Mike Pereira would have agreed with it, but Pereira said it wasn't a foul.
It's so confusing these days when it comes to.
And then we got a makeup call on Goddard, which was not a foul at all, but I will gladly take it.
So.
By the way, for all those talking about the cheese of the refs, Jalen Carter smashed Patrick Mahomes' face and they didn't call it.
That's true.
So, all right, speaking of Patrick Mahomes, Josh, how does a second Super Bowl loss change his perception? Because we had the GOAT conversation last week.
Not just a second Super Bowl loss, but a second Super Bowl beatdown. Because, again, the final score of Super Bowl 55 was 31-9, if I'm not mistaken. Or like 37-9.
I believe it was 31-9. I believe you're right.
Okay. And then at one point, you guys were up. I don't remember if you went up 40-0, but you.
It was 34.
Okay, 34-0. So the Chiefs basically lost both of these Super Bowls, Super Bowl 59 and Super Bowl 55, by a combined 40. Like, I don't care that they scored those garbage time touchdowns and made the score look.
Basically, if you do the math, it's 65-9, so 56.
Yes. Like That's ridiculous. And maybe that's more so because in both Super Bowls, the Chiefs' offensive line had questions. But at least for now, Brady holds on to his GOAT status.
By the way, even in the Super Bowl Brady was getting blown out in, he came back and won.
Yes. Um, I will tell you this. Even when you guys were up 34 to nothing, I was like, no, I'm not saying this is over.
Oh, at that point it was over. When Jay went for the ball to Devontae to make it 34-0, that's when I said it's
Or
over.
I'm sorry, not 34 nothing. When you guys were up, what was it?
24-0 at the half.
Yeah, yes, 24 nothing. I'm like, oh, I'm not willing to say this game is over. We've seen Mahomes come back. Like,
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Um, you know, I don't want to bang on Mahomes too much because the earliest the guy's been eliminated is the AFC Championship game when he's starting. So, I mean, I don't know. Like I've been saying, like, okay, they got blown out in the Super Bowl twice. What if, dear God, oh help us all again? But what if they go to two straight Super Bowls again? What if they win another back to back? You know, what if they go four Super Bowls in seven years?
yeah. I,
So I don't know. I think this is a we'll see question in time. Um, I actually put a little more of the blame on the Super Bowl. Obviously, the majority of it goes on Mahomes. But I don't think a lot of people are talking about the fact that Andy Reid did not adjust. Kansas City, I mean, they just looked lost from the start, and it was Andy Reid's knock in Philadelphia when he was there, which was Andy would have a game plan and he wouldn't come off his game plan, which I've given Belichick a ton of crap before about how he hasn't understood offense and he's the greatest defensive coach ever and gave a 41 in a Super Bowl, yada, yada, yada. But the one thing Belichick never would do was let his team get blown out in a big game.
yeah. I, I'm going to put a little less blame on Andy Reid in this case. Um, the Chicago Bears know where the blame should go. Uh,
Oh, you're putting the majority of the offensive blame on obviously Mahomes, but Matt Nagy.
yep, that's right. The Bears are like, oh, first time with the Matt Nagy experience. Like, Matt Nagy, what was that? Like, you knew Philadelphia was coming after Mahomes, and he didn't use his mobility at all. Like,
They
oh,
tried in the second half, but I mean they started way too late. That was the problem. They did make adjustments, but it was at the half.
yes, but that's what I'm saying. They should have come out and had Mahomes after like the first couple drives when they saw how much pressure Mahomes was under. They, they should have adjusted and been like, "Oh shit, let's start running some bootlegs
Well, the
and
other
get
thing is they didn't try to run the ball. How about start with that?
exactly." That's part. That's a huge reason why I'm putting a lot of the blame not on Andy Reid, but at the feet of the former Bears head coach Matt Nagy.
Because one thing on the opposite side, I got to give Kellen Moore a lot of credit for this. Saquon Barkley did not have a very good game at all,
No,
especially by his standards. But you know what he did? He kept running the ball.
the one the one little criticism I have for Kellen Moore, and I want to hear your opinion on this. I would have liked to have seen him get Saquon involved in other ways when you knew he was kind of limited.
They have these screens. They threw him like 5 or 6 screens.
Yeah, but I'm saying like maybe you could have lined him up as a wide receiver and gotten him a couple involved in the passing game that way, at least a little.
My take on it is he hasn't done that all year. So why do it now? I mean, Saquon is not known for his passing ability. That's why you have Devontae Smith. That's why you have AJ Brown. That's why you have Dallas Goddard, who only had one target in the whole freaking game.
So
Think about how good Dallas Goddard is. He's like what the fourth option. I mean, Jahan Dodson was getting more targets than Goddard.
yeah, so again, like a small critique, but whatever.
Overall, Ted, to answer the question on the screen again for Patrick Mahomes for Kansas City, listen, I am scared of what Kansas City's going to do in the offseason and what they're going to do next year. Because the one thing we know about Kansas City, when they lose, they do come back with a vengeance.
Yeah, and you know what happened the last time their offensive line got exposed? They
They
went out
completely redid it.
ex-
Completely.
exactly. I think you're going to see a similar thing happen this offseason, and the Chiefs aren't going anywhere. If you want to write them off, you can, but you're doing that at your own peril. Mahomes isn't going anywhere. I mean, Buffalo is still going to be in the mix. I,
Yes.
I don't want to say
Baltimore's going to be in the mix. If Cincinnati gets their defense together, they will be in the mix. They have a quarterback. The
it
Char-
depends. It depends on if they can keep Jamar Chase or not.
the Chargers are going to be in the mix. I
Den-
know a lot of people are like Denver. I think Denver's going to still be in the mix. A lot of people are interested to see what Liam Cohen does down there in Jacksonville. Houston just signed the Rams passing coordinator as their offensive coordinator. We'll see if they can rebound. I know a lot of people are interested to see what Anthony Richardson and Shane Steichen do potentially with a full off season in Indianapolis. So, like the AFC, we do know one thing: the NFC is getting better, but the AFC is still the supreme conference. But Kansas City is the head of that conference.
yes. Um, in terms of challengers for you, I would say Washington, the Rams. I can't say San Francisco because they have their own problems.
I think San Francisco is going to come back with a vengeance. Um, I'll say this: I think Washington is actually our number one challenger right now.
Okay,
The
fair
reason
enough.
why I'm hesitant on the Rams, there are rumors out there they may have a different quarterback next year.
Really?
Yes, there have been multiple reports out there that whether it's for the draft or for trade, they will look to get younger at the quarterback position.
Plus, it sounds like Cooper Cup is going to get traded this offseason also. But I'm not just going to dismiss the Rams regardless. We'll see if Arizona can build on what they did this offseason. I'm also interested in what Seattle's going to do.
Yeah, Seattle has to get a quarterback. I mean that's the thing with Seattle. You cannot run it back with Geno Smith. If you do, Seattle will win 9, 10 games again. I mean that will be their ceiling.
Yeah. I'd,
Green Bay with Jordan Love. I'm interested to see what they do. I am very interested in what Ben Johnson does in Chicago with Caleb, and I'm even more interested to see. I'm already on the record. I think the Lions. I don't think they're going to be as good next year. I think they will still be a playoff team, and I think that may be harder than people think for them to get back to the playoffs because I think losing both Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson is going to hurt them tremendously.
I would agree. Um, I, I don't know what to make of Minnesota. So,
If they have JJ McCarthy as their quarterback, I think they are a legit team. But I have as great as Brian Flores can be as a defensive coordinator. I've always thought Flores sort of beats up on bad quarterbacks and is not very good when the lights are brightest.
yeah. But again, like we said, Mahomes is still going to be around. Um, do I think he's going to be able to get the Chiefs to another in a position to go for a three-peat? No. But, you know, you can't dismiss the Chiefs. You can't.
You've seen the color on the screen change, which means our Super Bowl preview is over. And it's time to dive into NBA All Star Weekend 2025. And me and Josh are both not looking forward to this. I have never not looked forward to an NBA All Star Weekend more. It's Saturday night. I'm going to watch it because I know we're probably going to talk about it here on Championship Rings. But I'll be honest, I'm not looking forward to it at all. Uh, there's a couple Cavs players. I know Darius Garland and is in the 3-point contest. I want to say some of the Cavs maybe in the skills competition.
Yep. There,
Um,
there is a team
okay,
Cavs. I think it's Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley. Um, it'll be okay, but I respect Caitlin Clark's decision to not participate in like a 3-point contest. She wants to do her first All Star game with the WNBA in Indiana
which
next
she
season.
should. Um,
I
now are they doing another NBA WNBA or no? It's just the 3 point contest this year,
It's
right?
just a 3-point contest,
Okay.
which for me that was my favorite part of All Star Weekend last year was Steph Curry against Sabrina Ionescu. So I was hoping something like that would happen. Maybe the rematch. If Caitlin Clark hadn't said that she was going to make her All Star debut for the WNBA, I would have said something like Steph and Sabrina against Klay Thompson and Caitlin Clark, something like that. Um, but like for the All Star game, they're going with this new 4-team format, which I, it's
So it's. I'm assuming it's going to be 2 play 2, the other 2 play 2, and then the winners face off. Do we know like is there a point differential? Are these quarters? Like how long is it going to be?
I don't know all the rules on it. I I and honest to be honest with you, I don't care. Like
Are you going to be watching? I'm just going to throw that out there. It's okay if you say no. I'm not going to be mad at you.
I'll probably watch like the skills competition and the 3-point shootout. Do I care about the dunk contest though? No, because the dunk contest has been horrible for years. You want to know how you improve the dunk contest? I bet you that there are guys out on the streets right now who would put on an absolute show if you brought them in for the dunk contest. Maybe you have like you try and find you hold some type of competition, bring in some of the best dunkers, and like the top 5 or whatever qualify and get to All Star Weekend. Some of the top stars will sponsor them, and whoever wins gets like $1 million. Second place gets like 500,000, 750,000. Third place 500,000, so on and so forth. Then it would actually be fun to watch. But like, no, I don't care. The only other reason I'm gonna watch All Star Saturday Night is because AEW Grand Slam in Australia is gonna be following it.
That's right. I forgot about that.
But if that wasn't the case, no, I wouldn't. I would probably just watch skills competition and 3-point contest. Dunk contest is meaningless and pointless.
So I'm gonna do a full deep dive on Brandon's world. I'll spoil a little bit for you now here because I don't think we're gonna try to do all these topics on championship rings. I'm not gonna go over the NBA All Star Weekend in the entirety on Brandon's world. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a whole show, and it's gonna be my plan on how to fix the NBA in totality. One of them is All Star Weekend, and in my opinion, I think number one, this is the literal worst time of the year to have All Star Weekend. You are right after the Super Bowl. And with the NFL going to an 18-game schedule and it's going to seemingly be on President's Day anyway, the NBA is going to have to move the All Star game back. So, with that in mind, for me, if I'm the NBA, you do one of two things. You either A, move it back where you could move it to Pro Bowl weekend if you wanted to, because no one's going to watch the NFL Pro Bowl. Maybe you do like a Saturday night thing. Maybe the game's on Saturday. I don't know. Because they're certainly not going to abolish it. Or
They
B, like,
should.
they should, honestly. I think that if you're going to play the game, I don't really care about this 14 format. Though I will say I'm interested to see if the competition is actually going to be competition.
I don't
Because
think so.
I think that will determine whether in the public perception dies if it's at least a miniature fix. I think last year's All Star game, if you remember how bad last year's game was, it was flat out embarrassing. Luka Doncic at one point took a half court shot that was like an air ball uncontested, and I literally turned the game off. I was like, there is absolutely. I mean, it was a layup line with usually in an All Star game, there's little to no defense. There was no little. There was zero defense in that game last year, which I think was a lot of people's biggest issue. Because even like the years they did the Kobe Bryant target score, that I always thought, okay, in the fourth quarter, because there's no clock, you're going to get defense. And that's what we got.
Yeah. Um, as of right now, the 2026 All Star game is going to be at the Intuit Dome in LA, and then 2027 will be in Phoenix. So they're going to be staying out west for the next three All Star games. That's actually four. Let me think. Yeah, four of the last five All Star games have been out west because you had Salt Lake City. Now we're in Golden State. Then next year the Clippers, and then after that Phoenix. Um, but
Indiana was last year, right? I'm trying to remember. I think it was Indiana, right?
yes,
Yeah.
so that's the lone Eastern Conference team in this.
No disrespect to the Utah Jazz. Salt Lake City seemed like a weird place for All Star Weekend.
It's all Salt Lake City is a beautiful city. I've been out there.
Oh yes, I know it's a beautiful city, and I know they love their jazz. You can tell me more if you want. I'm just saying, from what I've heard, there's nothing to do in Utah.
Um, I didn't get to do a lot out there because my dad and I were out there for like a outdoor retailers convention or something. It just so happened to line up with coincidentally the Cavs playing the Jazz in Utah. It was Donovan Mitchell's return game actually
Right.
to the Jazz, so that was fun. But you know, they're, the NBA is going to be so dependent on Steph Curry to come through in this All Star game because he's the lone Golden State Warrior in this. There's nobody else. No Draymond, no Clay, obviously, because he's
No,
with Dallas.
no Jimmy Butler.
Nope. No Andrew Wiggins, because now he's with Miami. But, you know, all the weight of the world, basically, or however you want to say it, is on Steph Curry. If he does not come through, sorry, LA, sorry, Phoenix. I say the NBA should just get rid of All Star Weekend because
I think this is their last chance, and I think the players know it. I could be wrong. I think something inside me tells me there's a reason we should watch Sunday night. I'm not so sure about the skills competition. The 3 point contest is what it is. 3 point shooting. The dunk contest, who cares? But I think Sunday night those players are actually going to play.
yeah, because all we're asking, you don't have to make it look like an actual regular season game or an actual playoff game, but can you give more effort? Like, make it look like it's a practice or something, not just.
If I was the NBA this year, I would have changed the rules of the All Star game, and I would have tried out the new rule change they're talking about. Maybe you add in a 4 point line. Maybe you shrink the shot clock. Maybe whatever they want to do. Maybe you play the European rules and no goaltending. What? Maybe you bring back the hand check. That to me, like, use the All Star game for that.
Yeah, I agree. Like, the NBA, I believe, has talked about reducing the mid quarters from
That's
12.
what I mean. Try that in the All Star game. See how it works.
No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm just adding on to what you're saying.
Let me say this. For the NBA's sake, I hope it's a good All Star weekend. Because if this All Star weekend goes as bad as you think, and probably as bad as I fear it might, and I hope it doesn't, We already shows like ours, and we do it too, and we're guilty of it. And we've had this talk in our Vultures Live meetings. We talk a lot of football from August to February. We barely talk NBA. If this All Star game goes terrible, there will be no NBA talk till about April.
I would agree with you. Um, yeah, I can see what you're saying.
I'm
Um,
not saying we won't talk NBA. Basically, what I'm telling you is everything we'll talk about will be for naught
yeah,
because the NBA needs. Look, I was the biggest hater of Rob Manfred and baseball's adjustments. They all worked, and people like me that were very traditional, very old school, didn't like the pitch clock, didn't like the stolen bases. Guess what? It all worked. The NBA needs to make a seismic change. I don't know what it is. They need to get interest back in the regular season product. The other thing is, even the great players like Victor Wembanyama, to me, the NBA is not even marketing them as well as they could. These young players are not being marketed like the Stephs, like the LeBrons, like the Kevin Durants. The NBA is still holding on to those guys. We have Anthony Edwards. As much as I don't think he's a superstar, you do have Jason Tatum in Boston. You have Shea Gilders Alexander. You have everybody down in Houston. You have Wemby, as I mentioned. Like, to me, that needs to be the focus of this All Star. I know what you're saying, Steph Curry, Golden State. I get it. NBA, please talk about your young players because you're not doing as good of a job as you used to. Do you agree with me?
100%. It feels like the NBA is still like holding on to guys like Steph, guys like LeBron, guys like Kevin Durant. It feels like they're kind of waiting for that shoe to drop.
I
Oh,
I I said this, so it's funny, right? Because so on Thursday, I'm not going to give any spoilers here, but on Brandon's World, it's already been recorded. I am doing a top 10 NBA teams most under pressure, not the best teams, not the top 10, whatever. It's just the teams most under pressure to win the NBA Finals this year. And I said in that recording, you know who we don't talk about anymore? Shockingly,
us?
just the NBA as a general. Who is a star that I did not mention in my soliloquy just a minute ago? Who is a star who we don't
Giannis.
even think about? Giannis, yes. We don't even think. Giannis a couple years ago was undisputably the best player in the world. We don't even think of him now as top five, I would argue.
And we should be talking about Joel Embiid in that same breath
Oh,
with,
I said I'm done. I don't even have them in the championship window. Joel Embiid's too hurt. Paul George hurt. Who cares? Their season's over.
yeah,
Um,
I would agree with you.
So, I mean, but to your point, you have Embiid, you have Giannis. I mean, and all we talk about is Jokic, Luca, Shea, Tatum, because Boston's so good. Um, even Jalen Brunson. I feel like more people talked about Jalen Brunson last year than Giannis.
I would agree with you. And I think if Amen Thompson continues this track, more people are going to talk about him than
So he's
Giannis.
an interesting one because I don't think Houston knows. I don't forget if I was talking to you about it, or I was talking
You
to Fitz
did.
about it.
You did
I
talk
don't
to me.
I don't think Houston knows who their best player is. I kind of think it's Jalen Green. I love Amen Thompson. I think Jalen Green and Sengun are probably their two best, but I think Amen's probably your third. But to your point, like Amen could be the best. Like on some nights, even as great as Shea is, Shed Holmgren when he's healthy is the best in Oklahoma City.
And don't forget about Jalen Williams.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of these teams now, yes, you have to have your dynamic duos, but you also have to have those complementary players around them to make these championship teams.
Well,
Like,
look at the last two NBA champions. So Denver had their superstar Nikola Jokic. Their second best player was Corey Jamal Murray. And I thought Aaron Gordon was absolutely their third best player. And he was the perfect glue guy for that team. And you can make an argument for Michael Porter as well. Boston, you had Tatum and Brown were clearly 1 and 2. They were a little bit more debatable who was one and who was two. But Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis were the two big glue guys. I think Houston and Oklahoma City probably have one or two of those big glue guys. I don't know. I feel like Oklahoma City's good enough to make the finals this year. I feel like Houston's probably a year away. I just think they're probably one more player off. The wild card in all of it is obviously Luka and LeBron and what they can do in the playoffs.
So let me ask you this. Based off of what you were saying about having those two players and then that glue guy, do you think our hometown Cavaliers have that recipe?
I said it from the first week of the regular season when I watched this Cavs team and they started 15-0. This Cavs team is finals or bust. I think the biggest problem I could see with our team is we have to definitively make Evan Mobley our number two best player. To me, Darius Garland needs to become the third guy. Mobley needs to become the second guy. I think once they figure that out, this Cavs team will be very, very good. And I think the only team that could beat them in a 7-game series in the East is Boston.
I would agree. Um,
Do you agree with me though that like Mobley to me, like I think we have to have an undisputed second best player. I think it should be Mobley and not Garland.
I would agree with you. Um, I although I can make an argument that Mobley could be more of that glue guy and you could have Garland and Mitchell be your top two.
In
That
terms of points, probably yes, but Mobley will set the tone on the defensive end of the floor.
and that's why I'm saying he could be more of that glue guy. Um, although if you want to make the case Jared Allen could be more of the glue guy, I
I
mean
think I'll say this. I know Boston beat the Cavs pretty bad a couple weeks ago, whatever that was on that Tuesday night. I think it's because Evan Mobley did not play the game that he's been playing all year. I think if he plays the way he should play, the Cavs are the best team in basketball.
and our bench forgot to show up in that game besides Sam Merrill.
And now you have a legit wing in DeAndre Hunter, which the Cavs have not had since LeBron left in 2018.
Yes, and I have been asking for the Cavs to get a legitimate wing. And you know what? Yes, he got 5 fouls, but DeAndre Hunter gave us 12 points. I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
And hey, I'll give you. I want to give the rookie credit too. Jalen Tyson, since he's gotten more minutes, I've been more and more impressed with him.
I wonder just real quickly as we sort of bring this back to NBA All-Star Weekend and the Cavs sort of fit into this whole conversation as well. Is the NBA? We talked about this last year, right? Last year was supposed to be the transition period for the NBA. LeBron was out of the playoffs. Steph was out of the playoffs. KD was out of the playoffs. It sort of felt like they went for the transformation last year, and now the younger teams are coming afloat. But I think the NBA's problem is your Shays of the world, your Tatums, even I think a Donovan Mitchell, even your Jokic's. They don't want to be the face of the league. And I think that is the difference between the NBA of 10 years ago and the NBA of today, and why the NBA seems so similar is because all these players, big men, small guys, they all play similar games. And the margin of victory and the separation from the great teams, the good teams, is smaller because we don't have that. LeBron is clearly the best player, or Michael, or Larry and Magic. We don't have that anymore.
I would agree. And almost, you talked about the transition. It feels like the NBA is waiting for the new TV deal to kick in to do something.
That's the thing I was going to ask you. Is there I think the word is sentimental. I can never say that word correctly. Some value in the fact that this is like TNT's last sort of swan song, if you will, because even though everyone's been watching the playoffs, this is sort of the last time where all fans can come together. And basically, it's a little bit of a miniature goodbye, in my opinion, to TNT this weekend.
Yeah, I would agree. Even though the TNT guys, as I understand it, are coming to ESPN, I believe that's the case.
They are, but I don't know what the deal is going to be. Where if they're going to mix it with Countdown, if it's going to be its own show, if it's only going to be for the playoffs. Like we don't know the answers to that, and plus the broadcasts are obviously going to change. And
Yes.
I don't care what ESPN says. You and I both know whatever they get their hands on outside of Pat McAfee, they touch.
Yeah. I although I've heard them say Stephen A is not going to join them for that.
Well, again, they say that, and then who
Yeah.
knows?
But I think once the NBA gets their TV deal sorted, and it kicks in, you're going to see Vegas and Seattle come into the league in the next
Yeah.
2 to 3 years.
We should do a fun topic. This is me brainstorming out loud here as we end tonight's show. We should do a fun topic. Maybe not next week. Maybe we could if you want to do it. What's the NBA going to look like in 5 years?
I'm down.
That would be a fun topic, I think.
All right. I mean, the NFL offseason is here, so
We're going to be talking a lot more basketball. We're going to be talking, obviously, about free agency, but we got March Madness running around the corner. We have baseball running around the corner.
and don't forget WrestleMania. We
Yeah.
got our first official match last night.
We did.
Jey Uso versus Gunther for the World Heavyweight Championship. And you talk about faces of the company. I think if Jey Uso wins that championship and he has a strong title reign, I know there's Cody Rhodes. I know there's CM Punk, Drew McIntyre, Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, Rhea Ripley. I could go on and on. But I think there's a chance Jey Uso could become the face of the company. I really do.
This is not a wrestling topic on the show, but I'll make the argument he's already there.
Okay.
Like I think that Triple H now has a cheat code where he just says, "Hey Jay, to start every show, do your entrance."
And I loved how Gunther was just like, nope, I'm not letting this happen. Nope.
See, we're already talking on wrestling. We didn't even have it on the rundown tonight. WrestleMania 41 is going to be later this year. It's actually going to be right at the time the NBA playoffs start. So April is going to be a very busy month for us. And the NFL draft is going to be like the week after Mania.
That's right. So there you go.
Our mid-April show is we thought November was loaded with football. Our mid-April shows are going to be absolutely loaded.
Yeah. It's just going to be tough finding times because I'm going to be working all the home games for the Cavs.
Yeah. We're going to have a ton of fun. We're going to bring on our boy, C-Boss. We're going to bring on Sean Fitzgerald. We're going to bring on Jalen Sandvik. We're going to have all those guests throughout the offseason more. Folks, Championship Rings does not go away. Me and Josh are always here every Tuesday or sometimes Thursday nights, if you will, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We appreciate all of you guys who are commenting on YouTube, on X. Give us a follow. You can see all of our social medias there at the bottom of the screen. Josh, the Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl 59 champions. And you got anything else to say as we wrap up tonight's show?
Just for you. Fly, Eagles, fly. I'm not doing the full song.
On
but
the
I'll
road to victory.
There you go, buddy.
Fly, Eagles, fly. On the road to victory. Fly, Eagles, fly. Score a touchdown, 1, 2, 3. Hit 'em low, hit 'em high, and watch our Eagles fly. Fly, Eagles, fly. On the road to victory. E-A-T